Thanks, Doug. Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me. And let's see, I know we're starting just a few minutes late, my fault. I had another event to go to for Climate Generation, another great nonprofit organization. And so I'm going to do my best to go through this material that I have. So this event for me was a great opportunity to kind of geek out and really look in detail at some extensive reports and studies. So I hope you are wide awake and that you find this entertaining and interesting. So let me start by saying, as Doug mentioned, so I'm at the University of Minnesota now, and I direct a program called the Energy Transition Lab. And I'm part of the Institute on the Environment, affectionately known as IME. And we have a shared goal across all of IME and at my program ETL as well, and that is for a prosperous, equitable, carbon-neutral economy. And we see Minnesota as our living laboratory to try to help develop a model for how we can do this here in the Midwest and then share that more globally, especially with kind of the heartland of America that is a little slower to find decarbonization solutions or to get to clean energy than perhaps the East and West Coast are. Although we are kind of hidden gems in many ways here in the Midwest. So that's what I work on, and I thought this was a great opportunity to dig into this topic of how does energy storage really fit into this big pathway towards a low carbon economy. So I've worked on, at the Energy Transition Lab, worked on energy storage for several years, since 2015. And I know I came here and made a presentation with a graduate student, what was that, 2 years ago, maybe 3?
Yep.
Talking about energy storage. So that was kind of our early stages of our energy storage work. And to me, it's evolved to this point where I want to talk about where storage fits into that bigger picture of where we hope our state is going in this clean energy transition. Okay, so that's really the topic tonight, and I hope you enjoy that focus. So first, let's just to set the context and set the stage, why should we care about the energy transition? And it's always good to look back. I love this picture. This is from 1934, a schoolhouse in North Dakota, and you can see the looks of wonder on the children's faces when that very first light bulb came to this little schoolhouse for the very first time through rural electrification. And that's less than one lifetime away from us when that happened, just right in our part of the country. And it reminds us of two things. One is that we should be this is the season of gratitude. We should be all seasons should be about gratitude. But we remember that Thanksgiving in particular, that we're lucky and we should be grateful, I would say, that, compared to 1 billion people around the world that lack access to electricity, we have it really good here. And that's the second piece, is that having access to affordable, reliable electricity for a lifetime has really enabled the quality of life that we live in a very big way in the United States. And it's essential, it's getting more essential every day to our day-to-day lives to have access to reliable electricity, right? So that's kind of the context setting. It's good to have reliable power, but we can do better in how we do it. And the challenge that we face in trying to do better, trying to really get ahead of this, the challenges of our legacy energy system, this is a slide that my colleague, Professor Gabe Chan from the Humphrey School put together that really shows what would it take to get to those global climate targets of keeping warming to 2 degrees C by the end of the century. And this shows it's a big, big lift. Now, all of you are here because you really care about renewable energy and you're interested in it, and this shows you how much of a scaling up we need to do if we are truly to transform our energy system in the short time that it needs to be transformed. And I'm sure many of you saw the report that came out from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change just a couple months ago that talked about the fact that, this is from the top scientists in the world, that really in 12 years, by 2030, we need to make dramatic progress in cutting emissions. So I know this organization is about renewable energy, but I'm going to talk a lot about carbon emissions as part of the story of renewable energy tonight. So the challenge is big, and I was fortunate enough to be part of a delegation to go to Paris when the Paris Accord was signed into law. And so it's just a reminder, and took this little photo with my phone. It was an amazing experience to be there. Just a reminder that there is a global agreement. The consensus worldwide is that we must take action, and we must do it soon. And so this is just our part of that equation. Even though the political rhetoric we hear doesn't really reinforce that right now in the United States. But I think it needs to. So in Minnesota, we've shown that we really are good at developing our renewable energy resources, and we've made tremendous progress, and we've helped to, while we've kept our electricity system reliable and relatively affordable, we've also really advanced our energy systems in terms of cutting the carbon out of the system and making cleaner energy possible, while creating a lot of jobs and a lot of revenue for communities. So what I want to talk about today, that's just by way of introduction. As Minnesota moves to cut carbon from our economy and grow this clean energy economy, how does the grid need to change? And where does energy storage fit into that? So that's the context in which I'm going to talk about energy storage. So I have developed my little list of 4 key priority areas that I'd like to see Minnesota focus on in advancing this clean energy transition, and that I'm going to focus on tonight. Those are the top 4. Really high penetrations of renewable energy. We're now at 25%. How far can we go? Economy-wide greenhouse gas reduction, reduction in peak demand, and a modernized grid and distributed generation. So just a few little things on my to-do list. And then I want to, if we have time, which we may not, we can get into some of the details about energy storage and what will enable it to play an important role in this. So I have lots of notes. The longer I work at the university, the more kind of, like I said, the more I geek out. So I hope you're interested in hearing a lot of details. So let's start with high penetrations of renewable energy. Just ignore this. This is all the studies I'm going to mention. So we all know that in Minnesota we've made tremendous progress in renewable energy in the last couple of decades. And I can tell you from my personal experience working at the legislature and trying to pass a renewable energy standard for many years, that it was less than 20 years ago where energy experts came to the state capitol and said it would be impossible to incorporate or integrate more than 1 or 2 or 3% renewable electricity into our grid. Well, guess what? Now we're at 25% in Minnesota. In MISO, in our regional grid, there's been days where it's been 80% wind energy that they have to manage at times and integrate into the system. So not only have we proven that it can work, but we've done it in Minnesota at a relatively low cost. In fact, wind is the cheapest electricity source now in the Midwest and in many other places, and solar is well on its way to getting there. So now we have ambitions to really increase the amount of renewable energy in our system. And a lot of those perceived barriers that experts thought were standing in the way 20 years ago are gone, because people that, the grid operators and the utilities and the renewable energy developers have figured out how to do this really effectively. Technology's improved, costs have come down. So what's energy storage got to do with that? Well, we know that, for years, the idea of having good energy storage was kind of the holy grail to advance renewable energy, because we all know the wind doesn't blow all the time and the sun doesn't shine at night. So batteries or some other kind of storage are a perfect match for renewable energy. And we know that's still the case, and that's a key area of need for storage, but it's not all the time. And so we want to dig into that just a little bit. So you can see I pulled from 6 different studies and the things I'm going to talk to you about today. And the first one is the MRIT study, Minnesota Renewable Energy Integration Transmission Study. And that was a 2014 study that the state commissioned, the state of Minnesota, and it looked at 40 and 50% renewable energy. And I should mention there was a similar study like this back in 2006 that we used to help us pass the renewable energy standard, because the first study back in 2006 said, well, yeah, we can actually integrate 15 or 20 or 25% renewables. So that's why we said, let's make our law 25% then. And that's what we did. And so this study was a really important step forward to show that you could integrate 40 or 50% renewables given current engineering standards, and you could do it reliably and integrate it into the grid. Now, this study said that you probably could get there without needing a lot of energy storage to get to 40 or 50%. So that's really interesting that our ability to integrate has come so far. But once you get to really high penetrations, you're going to need more storage. And when you're talking about wind farms or solar farms, especially ones that are a distance away from the customers, the load, you're going to need longer term storage. So that's a big challenge for renewable energy. You probably all know that. You need long duration storage. And most of the buzz we've heard is about lithium ion batteries, because the price is coming down and they're everywhere, and they're growing. They're in the electric vehicles. They're in our electronic devices, and they're starting to be deployed slowly in Minnesota on the grid, or they have been for a little while. But there's lots of other possibilities, and pumped hydro storage that's the kind of energy storage that's been around the longest. It's out there, but it's kind of geographically constrained where you can build it. And so I want to tell you about a really interesting project up at NRRI. That's part of the University of Minnesota in Duluth. It's the Natural Resources Research Institute. And they're doing some interesting research looking at different kinds of long-term energy storage. For example, they have this concept of the Midwest battery, and they want to use old mine pit lakes up in northern Minnesota to store excess electricity. So when you have extra wind or solar power that you can't use at the time they're generated, you could use them to pump the water uphill, and then when electricity is expensive, you use that stored water to run downhill and run a turbine and create electricity when you need it at a low cost. And so trying to use those old mine pits for that is a really innovative concept, but they think they can create a battery that will store electricity for the whole Midwest. Interesting idea. And they're also looking at compressed air storage. They have at least a theoretical, it's not an actual experiment being tested right now, but to have a big kind of balloon underwater in Lake Superior. And other places have experimented with this as well. In Ontario, there's a company that's trying this that really is using compressed air in some kind of container, and then using that pressure of keeping it expanding when you have cheap or free electricity that's an extra, that's sitting around, that's not being used at the time, and then making use of it when you need it. So that's some of the ideas around energy storage for high penetrations of renewable energy. So let me jump to the next key priority area, and that's working on reducing greenhouse gases across the whole economy. So let's see, this just shows the studies. I talked about the costs going down for renewables. So what about greenhouse gas reduction across the whole economy? So in 2007, the year we passed the Renewable Energy Standard, the 25% by 2025, which we just met 7 years early. We also passed what's called the Next Generation Energy Act that incorporated a whole suite of these bills, and it included economy-wide goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And it says that by 2025, we're supposed to be reducing 30% of the carbon across our whole economy. So now the fact is that we've actually reduced, we've retired a lot of coal, and we've reduced, let me get my pointer going here, if I can. Here you can see electricity generation on the left has cut carbon 17% since 2000, off of 2005 levels, based, which is the baseline for this Next Generation Energy Act. But all these other parts of the economy, it's not happening. Transportation is now the biggest emitter of carbon emissions because the electricity sector has been so successful at decarbonizing, and it's well on its way to be more so. So now we have to figure out how to make transportation more efficient and pollute less, and agriculture and industry and residential and commercial heating and other uses and waste. And you can see with the red arrows here, some of these sectors are actually increasing their carbon footprint. And transportation and agriculture, according to the PCA's most recent report, are slowly cutting emissions. So that's a good start. But we have a long ways to go to meet our target of a 30% reduction by 2025, much less 80% reduction by 2050. So it's a big challenge. And I want to talk about a few studies related to this, because there's some really interesting work underway about how can we meet these goals? How can we get the carbon out of our energy systems broadly, not just electricity? And then where does storage fit into that? So this study, why did I put this one first? This came out today. So this is hot off the press. Have any of you seen it? It was just in my email inbox. And I've heard about this study, but I just saw it today. So I thought I had Excel first. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about Excel first, and then I'll come back to that new one. So Xcel Energy, as you know, our biggest utility, is going through a process of planning for its next big integrated resource plan. And they just asked for a delay till June that they would file it, June of 2019. And they're doing lots of stakeholder meetings. And if you're interested in this, they're open to everyone. I'm not sure when the next one is scheduled. But they've hired a consulting firm called E3. Is that what it's called? Yeah. And they are doing some really interesting scenario planning for Xcel, which will complement all the internal modeling work that the utilities do when they plan the grid for the next 15 years, which is what you have to put into your integrated resource plan. So they, at the last stakeholder meeting, they went through E3 analysis of 4 different scenarios for Minnesota's future, at least for Xcel's portion of that, in the upper Midwest. So it includes parts of the Dakotas and parts of Wisconsin and parts of Minnesota. So the business as usual case for Xcel is actually pretty good, because what they've committed to now is to reduce carbon 85% by 2030, and so that's one scenario. And they do say that to meet that, they need a combination of some new natural gas peaking plants, which are usually combustion turbines, and some storage. Then they looked at having a clean energy standard of 90 or 100%. So a clean energy standard means that any low carbon resource would count towards that. So it wouldn't be just renewable energy. It would probably include nuclear power or some other sources. It could include carbon, some sort of fossil fuel that captures the carbon and has a negative or a flat carbon footprint. So it's to be determined what that would look like. I don't know if there'll be any bills to do this in Minnesota, but it's a kind of policy that California recently passed, and each state has its own definition. Anyway, if we had a clean energy standard, of 90% or 100%. Excel's modelers say that would require 2 gigawatts more batteries and renewable energy. So 2 gigawatts, everybody know what a gigawatt is? Like 1,000 megawatts of batteries. That's a lot. I didn't have time to look up, how much battery storage capacity we have in Minnesota right now, but I can take a pretty good guess. Anybody have a guess on that? In Minnesota, what we have for storage? So just last month, Conexus Energy, our largest distribution co-op, just had a groundbreaking for their big, or actually a ribbon cutting. It's already up and running for the biggest battery storage project in Minnesota, which is a 10 megawatt battery system along with a solar array of, I think, 15 megawatts. And that is by far the biggest. Then there's like a 1 megawatt battery down in Laverne near a wind farm. So now we're up to 11 megawatts, and then we have some little systems. So that's where we are. So imagine 2 gigawatts of storage. That's a lot. Yeah?
You mentioned lithium ion, but there's lithium iron phosphate is a far better battery system. And some reason, if you buy some, he says lithium ion, but if you dig into it, it's lithium ferrite phosphate, and that seems like a far denser energy source than typical lead acid. You talked about a lot of these big battery systems. What are they using?
Yeah, there's a combination. I mean, lithium ion is the most common, but you're absolutely right that the phosphate ones are getting more popular, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about some other types of batteries as well, like flow batteries.
But you mentioned all this battery storage in Minnesota now. What is that?
It's mostly lead acid or lithium ion. Most of it is, yeah. So anyway, so to go back to Excel's scenarios, they had another scenario that was for 100% decarbonized grid by 2030. No fossil fuels. And they said that would require 5 gigawatts of 17-hour duration storage. So that's where you're starting to talk about the need for other kinds of batteries or other kinds of storage, because it's hard for a lithium ion battery to provide 17 hours of duration where it can still produce or expel power from the battery. And flow batteries are really good for longer duration storage, and there's some other ones coming on the market, as well as pumped hydro or thermal storage. So that's a lot. And then they have one other scenario that says no new gas plants by 2030, and that also requires twice as much storage. So depending on the variables that you use, there could be a big range in the amount of storage that's required. So then I want to talk a little bit about, nope, I don't have a slide on that either. Another report that I recommend you look at if you haven't, and this is commissioned by the McKnight Foundation. It's called Minnesota's Smarter Grid. Has anybody seen this? It's available online for free from the McKnight Foundation. And they analyzed 13 different scenarios for meeting these economy-wide greenhouse gas goals. And they did it based on economics. So the outcomes were based on what was the lowest cost option, and it included weather variables and all kinds of other data. And it basically concluded that by 2050 we could meet our goal to cut the carbon 80% by 2050 if we do a whole lot of energy efficiency and if we electrify the heck out of almost everything else. So it's very electrification focused, which is an interesting paradigm that I think we need to all take seriously, because there's a lot of momentum towards that. A lot of experts think that is the best, fastest way to get the carbon out of our energy systems. Under this scenario, one of these scenarios, one of the decarb ones, decarbonization, electricity would power almost all transportation by 2050. And it would also power a large amount of residential and commercial heating and cooling. And again, aggressive energy efficiency. This report, it's very detailed modeling. There's all kinds of data available in this. It's very interesting to peruse it. And it also shows that this would triple the number of jobs that Minnesota has in the clean energy economy. It would substantially reduce air pollution, certainly in our communities, because cars would switch from fossil fuel emissions to no emissions. And it would actually cost less. And part of the reason it would cost less is because you increase electricity demand a lot. So this is a dream for the utility companies. They could sell a whole bunch more kilowatts of power because there'd be all these other sources that are needing electricity. And that would help keep the prices down. Plus, by 2050, you're going to be relying on a lot of renewable energy that is very, very low cost. It's already low cost, but it's going to be really, really almost free because there's the fixed cost. There's free fuel. So let's see what this report said about storage, because this talk's supposed to be about storage, so I want to focus on storage. So again, this scenario, some more details about it, I guess, just to set the stage. Natural gas would play an important role, but diminishing. One thing that's really important about electrification scenarios is if you electrify more things, like cars and hot water heaters and your heating system through a heat pump of some sort, in your home or in other places, you have a lot more flexibility in how you can control these systems. So conventional power plants, more electromechanical controls. I'm not an engineer, so that's all I can say about it. Someone else can say what that, but basically it's a physical system that you're manipulating. When you have electrical power, you're talking about something that can be digitally and electronically controlled. And so you have the ability to put together smart homes when you electrify more of the systems within the buildings. And it's not just homes, it's commercial, it's all different scales where this could apply. And when you can electrify these things and you can digitally control the loads, that means that as customers and as energy users, whether we're small scale residential or big scale commercial, we can control how and when we use electricity. And if we use the right kind of control mechanisms, you can have it all programmed into your phone, and you can just say, here's what I want today, and make sure I'm only paying for electricity when it's below this price or really low cost, and make sure that I have my house at this temperature when I need it to be cool. And you can control those parameters, but you can also respond to what's going on in the grid. And so you can actually, the future, I think, will enable that participation to turn into actually providing services to the electricity grid from your EV and your solar panels and your other electronic systems, if you manage them correctly. Now, this requires regulatory reform. It requires pricing mechanisms that will enable you to make the choices that support the grid. But it's also a huge paradigm shift, because right now, for many, many years, our legacy energy system is designed so that you have to supply energy at all times to meet the demand. So, whenever the customers turn on more lights or turn on more air conditioning or whatever it is, you have to make sure you have enough power sitting there in reserve to meet it. So it's supply following the load or the demand. This paradigm is shifting completely, so that instead you're going to have the load follow the demand, the generation of electricity, so that the way we use electricity will depend on what resources are out there at a given point in time and how much they cost. All right, I can see I'm going to run out of time here because I got lots more to talk about. Anyway, this this big decarbonization scenario estimates 2,000 to 3,000 megawatts of storage So again, 2 or 3 gigawatts, and they're looking for long duration as well. So there's going to be a lot of storage needed to get there. Let me see if I can jump ahead a little bit. So the Solar Pathways project just came out today, as I mentioned. This models 70% system that's based on wind, solar, and storage. And you can look it up and read all about it. I'll just say that a couple of interesting findings are that, yes, they said solar and wind can serve 70% of Minnesota's electrical load by 2050. And they said that it's less, if you have excess wind and solar capacity, and you're allowed to curtail it and not, let it sort of have more than you need, that's actually cheaper than using storage. But storage is a really important part of a high renewables future. It helps to smooth out the variability of the solar and wind. And it talks about shifting of flexible loads, like I talked about, and that being able to do that can save money, save a lot of money for customers and reduce the cost of electricity. So I want to get to a couple of my other priority areas. Cutting peak demand. This to me is a big priority. This is all about how we overbuild our systems, and I just talked about excess capacity when it's renewables. That's one thing, but excess capacity is what we have right now with our peaking plants. It's like building a 20-lane highway to meet 2 hours of rush hour traffic, right? That's what we do. We have peaking plants that are only run a short number of hours every year, just to be there on the hottest day of the summer when everyone turns their air conditioners on at once. And that's a good thing to maintain reliability. It's essential, given the current system. And there's also a lot of waste in our electricity, in our current energy systems. I don't have time to go through this, but basically it says that our current energy systems, all the energy going in, and then all the end uses on the right side coming out, and this includes, gas, petroleum, coal, renewables, everything on the left side. You can see up on the top right, there's a lot of rejected energy. There's a lot of wasted BTUs and energy value in our current system. So we can do a lot better. I want to, on the topic of reducing peak demand, I want to just give you a few more facts and figures. The state of Massachusetts did a report called The State of Charge that was part of their big ambitious plan to push more deployment of energy storage. And they were looking at peak demand as a key problem that energy storage could tackle. And they said that Massachusetts electricity customers spend over $3 billion a year, and it's 40% of the total cost of electricity that they pay for. It's on the 10 most expensive hours of the year. That much money and that percent is for 10 most expensive hours of the year. So if you could shave off those peaks and have it not be so up and down where, you have this really high peak demand, it's a big cost driver for all of us, and it's a cost driver that really it embeds fossil fuel infrastructure into our system for years to come. And there's a lot of additional gas peaking plants that are forecasted for Minnesota and the Midwest. This is from a MISO forecast planning document that shows how many gas peakers are projected in Minnesota in the coming decade. There's a lot more of them planned. And if we could avoid that new fossil infrastructure, we'll go a lot further to making our energy system cleaner. And the bottom line is that storage can be used as an alternative. So I'm going to jump into a report that the Energy Transition Lab commissioned. In 2016 and 17, we organized some high-level workshops with stakeholders to talk about energy storage, and we all brainstormed. We had utility executives there, and renewable energy companies, and consumer advocates, and academics, and other energy experts, and state policymakers and regulators. And one of the brainstorms was, what about peak demand? Is there anything that storage could do to help reduce peak demand in Minnesota? And so we commissioned a study which I'm going to summarize really quickly instead of reading like 3 pages. What we found in this study, and we worked with 2 outside expert consultants, including Strategen, we found that if you include environmental benefits, that combining energy storage, battery, and a solar array, it's a more cost-effective alternative than a gas peaking plant, a new gas peaking plant being built. And the study found a lot of other interesting things too, but here's the data about the storage, and it showed that if you use storage only to try to avoid the need for a new gas peaking plant, that came out as, well, it's more expensive now, but in a few years, by 2023, it'll be cheaper. And then if you add solar to the project and have solar and storage together, it's already cheaper. That's what the modeling showed. And in some parts of the country, they're already doing this. They're using this combination to provide capacity power. That also included the ITC, the tax credit. Trying to jump ahead here. We also saw that this study, this is from the Rocky Mountain Institute, and it's a little hard to read, and I'll share my slides, if you want them. If anyone wants to look at them later, you can post them or whatever. This analyzes all different kinds of resources like wind, solar, inverter-based, renewables, and storage, as well as demand response, or controlling that load. And on the left side, you have all the conventional kinds of generation facilities, coal plants, gas plants, etc. And it looks at the capabilities that can be provided by these different resources and shows that a lot of the capabilities that the grid needs, like frequency regulation, make sure the frequency stays stable and where it needs to be, and other ancillary services, a lot of those can be provided by these newer kinds of resources. And that's getting more and more clear with research and experience. So that's pretty exciting. I want to say that when we did this when we released this report, which is called Modernizing Minnesota's Grid, I think, some of the utility companies questioned some of the numbers that we put into this study that came up with these numbers, and it's interesting because you can argue about those assumptions, till the cows come home. What is the exact forecast? What's the right forecast of how much batteries are going to cost, even now, compared to or a few years out? And what's the exact forecast for what gas is going to cost, natural gas is going to cost in the coming years? We don't know for sure, and so there's a lot of assumptions. But we do know that the cost of storage are going down dramatically. And one example I like to use is Conexus. I mentioned their 10 megawatt battery storage system, and it's 15 megawatt storage system and 10 megawatt solar. From the time their board approved the decision to go ahead with this and put out their RFP to the time they actually bought paid the bill or signed the contract, more or less a year later, the price had dropped in half of what they projected it to be. So, and that's continuing to go. So we know that even if our modeling was overly optimistic a year ago, we know it's only just a matter of time before it's 100% accurate, because the prices are dropping so precipitously. And look at this. I mean, what's happening is this is the experience that's happening with a lot of bids. While storage is still expensive, it's a big capital investment, there's a lot of appetite and there's a lot of competition in the market. So there's pretty good bids available. So another part of this report also talked about MISO and the MISO grid, and it showed that if you could put storage on the system, you're going to save money on the levelized cost of electricity. And the reason for that primarily is that having more storage on the MISO big grid system that you have, the more you enable more low-cost renewable energy. So a lot of times the answer comes back to it's about more renewable energy And enabling that is good, it's good all around. It's good for emissions, it's good for clean air, it's good for jobs, and it's good for cutting emissions a lot, and for price. It's getting to be the best way to save money. So I'm going to jump into my fourth category, grid modernization and distributed generation, just real quickly. There's a lot to say about this. I talked about flexible loads and about customers managing their loads. I'm not going to really get into this, but to say that, I don't have the slide that shows you how much distributed generation we have in Minnesota, but we know that the community solar program is growing dramatically, and we're leading the nation in that. We have well over 400 megawatts of community solar already. So the amount of distributed generation that we have is growing, and that's going to require business models to evolve, and there's going to be a lot of need for more local distribution and customer scale energy storage. We are doing a project at the Energy Transition Lab. We got funding from the State Environmental and Natural Resources Trust Fund, otherwise known as the lottery money. So when you buy a lottery ticket, 40% goes into this fund to protect the environment and help support our natural resources. And they do some clean energy kinds of expenditures, and they actually, the commission that oversees this money was super enthusiastic about a project I brought to them 3 years ago, but they approved it right away, but it took 3 years for the legislature to pass it, because there were some folks in the legislature that didn't really like anything that talked about clean energy. So, but some of them don't chair committees anymore since the election. So, sorry, I don't want to get political.
We understand.
Let's just leave it at that. In any case, we got funding to do community scale energy storage projects. So we have funds to build 3 projects across Minnesota, one in northern Minnesota, one in rural area of Minnesota, and one in the metro. And so we have the funds to buy a battery system, to pair it with a host sites that have some sort of renewable energy on site as a partner. So we're looking for really great partners that are interested in this. It's aimed at nonprofits, so campuses or community serving organizations or other kinds of places that really want to learn how to experiment at the scale that is bigger than residential, but smaller than a utility. So somewhere in the middle, we'll be doing this. So stay tuned, you'll be hearing more about this. So maybe I should, there's a lot we could say about energy storage policy. We still have a lot of work to do to make the regulatory and policy framework fit the capabilities of storage. And MISO is responding to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the FERC Order 841 a year ago that said every regional grid operator has to modernize their rules and the market products, the tariffs that they offer, to enable the capabilities that energy storage brings to the system. And it's a lot of different capabilities, and it cuts across all the traditional boundaries, because it can be a provider of power, it can take power away and store it, it can inject it into the grid, and it can actually supplement transmission and help to avoid the need for some transmission infrastructure. So it serves a lot of functions, and the rules need to support that so you can monetize those benefits. We also have work to do at the state level in policy. We could talk about that, but maybe what I should do is just at least roll it up now so that we can have just a few minutes for discussion. So any questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a question about the supply of lithium, because it seems like there's going to be a really big demand, not just by Minnesota, but basically the whole world. So is that included anywhere in these reports and studies?
Yeah, that's a great question, and not in these particular studies, but there's a lot of people looking into that and about the materials that are needed to make batteries. Because lithium ion is growing so dramatically fast, and it's the price is going down, so it's kind of the popular choice for batteries, but it's not going to be able to meet these demands for storage that I was talking about that are gigawatt scales. It maybe will be able to meet the demand for electric vehicles, but not grid scale storage. So we need other materials that are more abundant, that are cheaper, and some of these materials are sourced from places that have very bad human rights track records. So there's a lot of downsides to a lot of these materials. I want to let you know about an event that we just put out a notice for at the University of Minnesota. We're going to have a professor from Macalester come, who's an affiliate of ours, come and talk about mining for metals, urban mining for metals, to try to figure out how to meet the needs of metals for our clean energy transition in a more sustainable way. So I believe it's 2 weeks out. I think it's Monday the 26th. But if you look on the Energy Transition Lab website, we'll have that posted probably tomorrow.
It is.
Thank you. Very good. Yeah.
What do you use for the lifetime of the lithium batteries or other battery storage?
Yeah, I don't know what the warranties say, but it's 10 years or plus, I would say. So they have to be replaced over time. There is a secondary market for some kinds of batteries, but oftentimes, like I think it's BMW that's taking their car batteries, and after they've run their course and they're not efficient enough to run vehicles, they can put them all in a big storage unit and use them to support building storage. But then there's also there's the replacement cost that's needed, and there's the disposal and recycling of the materials that's needed. So life cycle is an important question. Okay, I think I called on you, and then did you have a question, man?
You had a bar for
Yeah.
carbon reduction.
Yeah.
I am addicted to my car, and everybody else in here I would bet is also. There's a clear definition of addiction. If you look at it rationally, the withdrawal period is defined in the manual. Won't stop. Ah! Okay? And so you can increase your gas mileage by a factor of 4 by giving 3 people a ride. And until people figure that out, and the government doesn't seem to be doing anything about it. They got these lights out there on the freeways, and they can stop you from going in, and pretty soon you'd say, gee, I'm almost at home. I should have done something else. And is there anybody addressing that issue?
Well, I think what you're talking about is a broad array of transportation solutions that are needed, and that includes how we plan and build cities and land use, but it also includes public transit, it includes car sharing, it includes enabling infrastructure for biking and scootering and walking, and all of those things are part of a comprehensive smart transportation plan. So it's not just about buying a really cool new electric vehicle. That's not the only solution, absolutely. So, good point. Yeah.
I wanted to follow along on the comment about lithium and the price going up as the demand for it goes up, and you need some other material that's abundant and so forth. An obvious, very, very abundant material that's highly energy dense is hydrogen, which you can get from water. What's going on in that area?
I'm not an expert on what's going on in that area. It's a great question about hydrogen. If you, I know there's some interesting research going on at the University of Minnesota Morris campus, or at the Outreach and Research Center there, West Rock. And they have done, in Morris, the campus combined with the Outreach Center has done some really interesting work, and they're moving towards carbon neutrality on their campus. They are already making ammonia for fertilizer out of wind energy and hydrolysis and nitrogen from the air. So they're creating ammonia from those 3 renewable resources and using that hydrogen process of splitting the H2O into hydrogen and oxygen and creating ammonia that can be used. They're selling it to local farmers as a low-cost, carbon-free form of fertilizer. And I believe they got some ARPA-E funding from the U.S. Department of Energy to work, or is it DOD, to work on further using that ammonia and hydrogen as a storage capability. So that would be a great place to check and see what's new and innovative going on right here in Minnesota.
So
Yes.
that was my question.
Oh,
what
hydrogen.
storage capacity do we have that's not lithium?
Yeah, and flow batteries are another really promising technology that use all different kinds of materials, and they're easy to scale into big scale and long duration, and they can be made with less toxic materials. So they're really promising. I'd love to be able to test some of those in Minnesota. All right, I think we're probably out of time. Okay, one last question.
How
Or
come
comment.
we all don't have meters, electric meters, that bill us the true cost at the time, either by minute or by hour? So when the cost of electricity is, like there's peaking plants and why don't they just, if they build us that way, we would knock these peaks right off there, because we wouldn't, isn't that, what's stopping that from happening?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's sort of, it's a part of our legacy regulated utility system is that we have flat rates for electricity for most customers. I mean, some big industrial customers, a lot of commercial industrial customers pay demand charges, so they do pay for that peak demand that they use maybe once a month. Whatever their highest peak is, they have to pay a fee for, and that can be really costly. And so they do have an incentive. But residential customers, not at all. And so you're absolutely right. Those price signals can change what we do. XL is doing a pilot right now on time of use pricing, on real-time pricing. So I don't know exactly which customers are going to be in that pilot, but they're doing that in other states. It's now the default in California that they are doing that kind of pricing. So yes, I think that's needed as we try to make our grid modern and evolved and more functional. To meet maybe that's a good note to end on. We want it to serve our interests, the public interests, for the greater good, and that's a part of the solution. So, thank you.